The Mets let one get away on Thursday night due to some sloppy play, but at least they have Jonah Tong debuting today to hopefully provide another jolt to this roster.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, the Mets had an opportunity to build off their momentum on Thursday night and beat a Marlins team that is not very good. And they simply let one get away due to some sloppy play in the field. They didn't hit enough, and it was just a missed opportunity. Meanwhile, the Phillies get home and they beat up the Braves by a score of 19-4. Kyle Schwarber hits 4 home runs, and once again, they have a 5-game lead in the National League East. And what I want to do before we talk about the specifics of the game is just illustrate the needle the New York Mets are trying to thread right now. Because, of course, we all woke up yesterday thinking, all right, they got a real shot at this thing. They went from 7 games back to 4 games back. Looks a lot better. But to pick up the rest of that ground and to get over the hump and win this division, it is going to take the Mets playing great baseball. It's going to take them having a big winning streak at some point, and their winning streak was snapped. They had a chance to build something. If you even go back to last Sunday against the Braves, they let that game get away. That could have been, had they won that game, that could have been 6 games in a row. If they didn't let games get away against the Nationals, that could have been even a longer winning streak. And you need to have that set of games where you might win 9 in a row. That's what it's going to take to win this division. Right now, after the Phillies beat up on the Braves, they got a 77-57 record with 28 games left to play. If the Phillies just play 500 baseball from here on out, they will finish this season as a 91-win team. Now the Mets, 5 games behind, they have 72 wins. So to win 19 more games, the New York Mets are going to have to do some heavy lifting. They have 9 series left to play, including the one they're playing right now against the Marlins. Let's just say Jonah Tong's awesome. They end up winning the rest of the games in this series, and they go on the road riding a 3-game winning streak with, at that point, then 8 series left to play. And let's say when they get to Philly, they just split that 4-game set against the Phillies, which I think is still a good outcome for the Mets. And then they win every single series other than that. That would bring them to exactly 91 wins. And remember, that's if the Phillies just play 500 baseball. Let's say the Phillies, play a little bit better than that. They win 18 more games. Now the Mets got to get up to a 95-win finish with, are they at the exact same, how many more games the Mets have to play? The Mets they also have 28 games. So the Mets would have to go, to get to 95 wins, they'd have to go 23-5. It's not going to happen. So this is where this division is going to require a couple things for the Mets to win. The Phillies are going to have to play average, and the Mets are going to play much better than that. And really, the Mets are going to have a stretch where they win a lot of games in a row. So when you drop a game like the Mets did on Thursday to the Marlins, it can be devastating to your chances because that's just a game that you have to have. And, maybe the Mets just want to get in. They just want to grab that final wild card spot and have a ticket to the dance. And that's all that matters. You know what? If they get hot at the right time, that could be all that matters. They got a 4-game lead on the Reds. So it's not like the Mets all of a sudden are, seeing their playoff hopes dangle by a thread. But it's just a missed opportunity to maintain some momentum because while the math doesn't seem like it's possible at this very moment, again, anything can happen in a season. If the Mets had steamrolled the Marlins this weekend and the Phillies end up splitting their series against the Braves, then all of a sudden, what was a 4-game deficit could have been a 2-game deficit. Now, if they split, you just lost an opportunity to pick up a game. So it was a rough loss for the Mets, and it just kind of brings it back up to the surface how tough it's going to be for this team really to pull off a division victory unless they are able to really beat up the Phillies when they get to that series in a couple weeks in Philadelphia, and that's going to be really hard to do. So let's get to the specifics of this game now, because I know that the takeaway that I was seeing a lot from fans was, why is Clay Holmes still in this rotation? And to me, that felt like someone that was not watching the game, that just was looking at the fact that, the Marlins scored 4 runs while Clay Holmes was standing on the mound. It's on him. But if you go through this game, it was the defense that the Mets played. And granted, Clay Holmes was part of it, but it was the defense. First inning, the Marlins score a run, couple of singles and a sacrifice fly, but that was it. And the Mets come right back in the bottom of the first. Francisco Lindor leadoff single, back-to-back doubles by Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo. You got a 2-1 lead again. Neither team scored in the second inning, but in the third inning, Xavier Edwards gets hit by a pitch. He steals second base, a ground out advances into third. Here was one of the biggest plays in the game. Just a boneheaded play. It's one thing to make a physical error. A ball takes a big hop and you can't field it cleanly. It's another thing to make a mental error, to just make a dumb decision on the field. And that's what Jeff McNeil did. He gets a ground ball hit to him. And yes, infield was in. He charges. But you got to know your runner. And Xavier Edwards flies, and he got a great jump. At that point, it's a 2-1 game. It's the third inning. Take the out. Instead, he comes home with it, and it wasn't even close. So what does that do to the Mets? Well, instead of having 2 outs, nobody on, now you got a runner on, 1 out. Next batter grounds out. That would have been the inning. It wasn't. Instead, the inning gets extended. Another ground ball. Here comes Clay Holmes' defensive mistake. Pete Alonso fields it, makes a throw to Holmes. I think it's often when there is a misplay on Pete Alonso throwing to a pitcher, you blame Pete. Yes, he maybe led him a little bit further than he should have, but I mean, the ball hits his glove. It's just like anything. If the ball hits your glove, you should make that play. Or if you're playing football, the ball hits your hands. Like that's one that Holmes has to catch. And if he does, he's out of the inning. Instead, a run scores, then he gives up a base hit that would score another one before he gets out of the inning. So you had an opportunity there to get out of the inning at a 2-2 tie game if Jeff McNeil simply takes the out. Jeff McNeil takes the out, 2 outs, nobody on, you're good. Next ground ball, you're out of the inning. And Clay Holmes throws 11 less pitches. The reason why I say all of that is because, again, I was seeing that sentiment of, oh man, Clay Holmes needs to be removed from this rotation. I didn't see that. I saw his stuff still look pretty good, and he gets through 5 innings giving up 2 earned runs. And had he not had to have that inning extend on him, and he threw 11 less pitches, he only throws 88 pitches on the night to get through 5, he would have been sitting at maybe 77 pitches to get through 5. He might have been able to go out there and get a 6th inning. So I don't think Clay Holmes is the issue. Yes, he should have caught that ball, but I don't think his pitching and him being in the starting rotation is the reason why the Mets lost this game. And I certainly don't think they have to all of a sudden yank him from this rotation right now. Now, we will talk a little bit throughout this show, as I will get into Tylor Megill's rehab start tonight, about long-term if Holmes eventually gets pulled. But I don't think it's because he's not pitching well. I think he's actually been pretty solid over his last couple turns through this rotation. Now, even with all of that, the Mets still tied this game. Pete Alonso hits a 2-run homer, his 30th of the season. The Mets have a tie game 4-4 going into the 7th inning. Gregory Soto takes the mound, gives up a leadoff single. Gets a potential double play ball. Pete Alonso just botches it. He was maybe trying to make the throw before he saw the ball into his glove. And not only does he not come up with it and be able to get to second base and get the 1 out, he can't even get that at first. Everybody's safe. Even if Pete just gets 1 out, the inning could be completely different. Even if he just fields it cleanly, maybe they couldn't have turned 2, but he fields it cleanly, gets the force out at second. Well, then you have a base hit in left field after this. So what happens, because he doesn't make the play, you got 2 runners on. Brandon Nimmo, gets a ball hit out to him, and he doesn't come up with it cleanly. Sloppy play again, continuing. Had Nimmo fielded it cleanly, come up firing. They might not have even tried to score there. And if they did, you might have had a play at the plate. But instead, run just easily comes in. Then you have a pass ball by Hayden Senga that allows both of the runners to advance. Soto gets a strikeout, then another ground ball to Jeff McNeil. This time there was a better chance at a play at the plate, but they still don't convert that. And then a sacrifice fly brings in a third run of the inning, and the Mets end up losing this game 7-4. But to me, it's sloppy play. That's all it comes down to. If early in the game Jeff McNeil takes the out, who knows what would have happened? Maybe Pete Alonso's home run puts the Mets up 4-2. Maybe you have the lead and the Marlins, kind of crumble a little bit, because sometimes when you have one of these teams that's just playing spoiler at this point, you get ahead on them, you might be able to put them away. Granted, this Marlins team has a lot of spunk to it. They certainly are a frisky team, even without their best player, Tylor being out. But you just can't give another team so many opportunities, because the Marlins, they're able to take advantage of all of them, and you lose this game. And that's a game that you really wish you had back, because then you're riding high on a 4-game winning streak with Jonah Tong making his debut on Friday and a chance to really build an even further winning streak and really extend things and really hopefully put a bigger chip into the Phillies leading this division. Instead, you lose a game. So what I want to talk about next is if the Mets can get their momentum back, and Jonah Tong's going to do a pretty big lift there, I think, on getting this team back on track. I want to talk about his debut, what's coming up here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code SEASON and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commute, and that could be you as well. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this opportunity drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using my limited time promo code SEASON for a limited 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code SEASON. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I'd love to get there by the end of the season, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. So what are the New York Mets going to get tonight with their 22-year-old phenom, Jonah Tong, making his MLB debut? We've talked about Tong a lot throughout the season, and certainly lately with the news of his promotion. But I want to put in context his season and what he's done, because his first 2 starts, he gave up 6 earned runs. Since then, he's given up 12 earned runs in over 100 innings pitched. And Joe DeMaio of SNY put out the stats of his last 19 starts. And I think he did a sample size of the last 19 starts to remove his 3rd start of the season, where he did give up a homer. And I think that was the only earned run that he allowed that game. Only went 4 1/3. I think he still struck out like 7, so it wasn't even a bad start. But he narrows down his season to the last 19 starts, so he removes the first 3. Since April 22nd, Jonah Tong has pitched 103rd innings pitched, 47 hits allowed in 100 innings, 1 home run allowed, 159 strikeouts. Says opponents hit 137 with a 401 OPS against him and a 54% ground ball rate. ERA 0.99, 11 earned runs in 103rd innings pitched. That's why the Mets called him up, because simply he was too dominant to keep wasting bullets in the minor leagues. And they bring him up to AAA after a season of just thriving in AA. Has 2 starts, doesn't give up a run. And David Stearns talked about the fact that each of those starts he navigated in a much different way, and he was able to find counters to adjust on the fly and get outs. And they are now projecting that he's going to be able to do that at the big league level. And I think this is a great matchup for him against a Marlins team that has a lot of younger, more inexperienced hitters, where that fastball is going to play. And I think he's going to light up not just the radar gun, but really just light up that K corner and rack up a bunch of strikeouts and provide a lot of energy, at a Friday night at Citi Field. Now, for those of you who aren't aware of the Arsenal, I know some of you have been listening and know it, but it's still worth breaking it down. And we have all of the work over at Just Baseball that does a great job of this for me, Just Baseball, where I write. And we have the best top 100 list you're going to find that's not behind a paywall. Jonah Tong checked in at number 47 on our last update. Nolan McClean, number 42. Carson Bench, 19. Let's have a lot of top 100 prospects on our list. But to go through Arm's scouting report of Jonah Tong, I just want to read from it here. He says a unique over-the-top release and a slight crossfire delivery make Tong an uncomfortable at bat for hitters. Tong enjoyed another uptick with its fastball in 2025, now averaging 95 miles per hour on the pitch that plays up further for Tong as he averages more than 19 inches of induced vertical break from a release height slightly above 6 feet. So what does all of that mean? So Jonah Tong, his fastball is elite, but it's not elite because he throws 100. Now, I think he's touched 98 this year, but he sits in the mid-90s. That fastball was elite, though, last year at 92. And it's because of induced vertical break. And what induced vertical break is it's essentially defying gravity. It's pitches that are not pulled down. Induced vertical break is that perceived ride. It's the fact that his fastball up in the zone, it looks like it's rising because of his over-the-top release, the way that he's able to spin that baseball and to get that ride up in the zone with the four seam. And then you have the changeup. Continuing on from the scouting report here, Arm says with the carrying deception, Tong dominates within the zone, generating elite whiff rates while also getting chased at the top. So again, that's that mention to the fastball up in the zone. And an even bigger development than the uptick in velocity has been Tong's changeup in 2025. Sitting in the mid-80s, the pitch is difficult to pick up out of his hand, and it averages roughly 20 inches of total separation from the fastball, one of the highest marks in minor league baseball. So you have this changeup now, right, where not only does it drop compared to the fastball, but you also have it breaking away from the left-handed batter and into the right-handed batter. And so what that gives Jonah Tong is the ability to tunnel those two pitches where guys are sitting fastball, they're gearing up for it, and you get 10 miles per hour difference in separation and velocity plus 20 inches of separation when it comes to the movement profiles. And it's just really tough to be sitting fastball and adjust the changeup when it's that good of a changeup. He also has a curveball and a slider. And in the scouting report, Arm does talk about those pitches and how he's had some inconsistency landing them for strikes. That's what I've been talking about on the show, the last part of his development that still needs to be ironed out for him to reach his ceiling. But what the Mets have clearly decided here is the fastball and the changeup alone are going to play to the point that he can get big league hitters out. And they believe that he has the ability with the curveball and the slider to identify which pitch might be working on a given day against a given lineup and lean into that when he needs to. But in his last two starts in AAA, David Stearns again complimented him on his ability to use a different roadmap to find success. That roadmap still included well over 80% usage of his fastball and his changeup. So those are going to be the two pitches we're going to see the most. Now, I already mentioned it before on the show. He might flip off a 12-6 curveball that looks so good that it gets the pitching ninja, clip that goes viral on social media. And it's this big breaker and everyone gets wowed by it. But the inconsistency with those pitches is going to keep him from throwing them much more than maybe 15% on a given start for one of the two if he finds one he likes more in that start. I don't think we're going to see many starts where it's 30% usage on his breaking balls. But that's fine. And maybe the combination of them, but not a singular breaking ball that's over even 20%. It's going to be fastball changeup primarily, and those pitches work so well off each other, and the fastball is so hard to hit in zone. He should have a lot of success in the big leagues, even just starting out, especially against a more inexperienced lineup. Now, how long he sticks, we don't know. To me, this really is a one start situation to see what it looks like. And if he provides the type of jolt that Nolan McClean did in his debut, you're not going to remove him for the rotation after that start. So it could be much longer, but we'll see how he goes tonight. The interesting thing is he's actually squaring up against another 22-year-old, Yuri Perez, who is nicknamed in Miami Baby Goat. A pair of 22-year-olds going head-to-head here. Yuri, though, has 33 big league starts under his belt, and he debuted when he was 20. So he's got some more big league experience here. 3.44 ERA in the season for him across 14 starts and a whip just under 1. So it's going to be a tough matchup for the Mets bats. But in this game, what you want to see happen is Jonah Tong dominate and breathe more life into the New York Mets. And I think down the stretch, what they're counting on is Nolan McClean and Jonah Tong to provide a lift to this team and just give them that infusion of youth that'll hopefully steady this rotation. And maybe in the meantime, you start to see Manaea and Senga pick it up and get to the point where you're comfortable handing the ball to your veterans come October. I still think Nolan McClean's going to be in this rotation all the way through. I'm not as sure about Jonah Tong, but again, we haven't seen him pitch in the big leagues yet. This is still one of those games, though, that you want to watch. You want to tune in from first pitch. You want to be locked into the broadcast because this is your future as a Mets fan watching these guys. This is the next wave that has come up that hopefully will be together in this rotation for the next half decade and be part of a lot of winning teams. So it's exciting stuff. That alone, if the Mets were out of it and Jonah Tong was making his debut, it'd be exciting. The fact that they're in this race and there is an ability coming up here for Jonah Tong to pitch a couple of really big games for this team, that's where there's even more intrigue that's added to this. And that's what I want to talk about to close out the show. I want to give you an update on Tylor Megill and what he did in his rehab start and sort of forecast how Megill gets inserted into this rotation and what that means for Tong, as well as maybe even a Clay Holmes. So we'll go through that and also give you an update on Francisco Alvarez, all of that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have that full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And that is where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all of your accounts in minutes so you can see clear data visuals, getting smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch, and you just see everything so much clearer. You see those subscriptions that you have that you're paying for each month that you aren't using, and you realize maybe I should cancel some of those to save money every month. Don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONMLB. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find a link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, the QR code has been on the screen, so you can always scan that as well for your chance at one of those $100 Amazon gift cards. So let's talk a little bit here about Tylor Megill's start on rehab in Syracuse. Not the best one. He had one really bad inning, only made it up to 70 pitches. The goal was to get to 75, but he had one, again, awful inning, gave up 3 runs over 4 innings pitched, 4 hits, 4 walks with 4 strikeouts. The second inning was the rough one for him. Gave up a leadoff homer, then he walked 3 consecutive batters, struck out 2, walked another batter, gave him a base hit, and then finally was able to get out of the jam. But 3 runs came across against Megill. The question now is, does he need another rehab start? And considering the lack of command in this outing, I tend to think that he might. So how does Megill fit into this rotation? Well, you got Jonah Tong going tonight, David Peterson on Saturday, Kodai Senga on Sunday. The Mets then head to Detroit on Monday, and it'll be Sean Manaea taking the mound with Nolan McClean to follow. Then I would imagine Clay Holmes will get another start on September 3rd. Could be a situation where you insert Megill into the rotation and start to transition Holmes into the bullpen, but I don't think they're going to make that move yet. I don't think that they believe that Tylor Megill is an upgrade over Clay Holmes in the rotation. You have an off day, then you go to Cincinnati for a weekend series, and that's where I mentioned how Jonah Tong can start some big games. Jonah Tong would start a game against the team that's chasing you in the wild card race to open up that series in Cincy. You then have David Peterson, Kodai Senga. Then you go to Philly. You'd have Sean Manaea and Nolan McClean set up for the first two games of that series, where I think it's pretty awesome that those guys would hopefully get the Mets off on a good start. Then you'd have a game on September 10th where you'd have to decide if you're going to stick with Clay Holmes at that point or go to Tylor Megill. So I feel like by September 10th, we should have a better idea of what the Mets are planning with their rotation. You also have Brandon Sproat that's waiting in the wings. I don't know if the Mets really want to rely on 3 top prospects for their playoff push, but you never really know what they're going to decide to do. So I think we see one more rehab start for Tylor Megill to build up his pitch count a little bit further and to sort of kick the can down the road. And I think they would keep Clay Holmes in this rotation for now because his last 3 starts, I think, have been pretty good. I know a lot of people think tonight was a bad start. I really don't think so. 88 pitches to get through 5 innings when you wasted 11 after that inning where Jeff McNeil didn't make the play that he should have, and Clay Holmes didn't make the play that he should have, which again would have probably shaved like 8 more pitches off of his pitch count. Again, even then he might have been able to get a little bit more, but 5 innings of 2-run ball for Holmes is fine right now. It really is. So I think he stays in the rotation for a little bit longer, and Megill has to stay on rehab for at least another week. Now, the other part of what the Mets have to solve when it comes to the pitching down the stretch is that bridge to Edwin Diaz. And Ryan Helsley believes, and I guess the Mets brass and everybody believes, that he's been tipping pitches. So that's going to be big. If he can figure that out and stop tipping, then you won't have guys sitting fastball as well as they have been lately. And his stuff should play. 101 should play. So if Ryan Helsley can iron that out, that's going to go a long way at helping this bullpen. If not, you probably have to dip into your rotation to help your bullpen. And the question is, who would thrive the most in a late inning role? And that's where Clay Holmes becomes more interesting. Because of his experience pitching out of the bullpen, you just have to wonder when the Mets are going to go to that card and say, all right, get back to what you used to do and be that late inning reliever that can really help us right now. Because if you just put up names that the Mets have right now in their roster, and you were to say, who has had the most success as a relief pitcher, how high does Clay Holmes go on that list? Edwin Diaz 1, Ryan Helsley maybe 2. Tyler Rogers has been very effective, but Clay Holmes is right there with Helsley and Rogers, and even to a certain extent with Diaz. I mean, Clay Holmes was one of the best relievers in baseball for years with the Yankees. So I do wonder if and when they ever choose to go to that, or if they are so committed to Holmes as a starting pitcher that they just never broach the topic and they continue to run with him throughout the rest of the season and even into the playoffs. I really don't know. What I will say, though, is Clay Holmes right now, over the last 3 turns, you'd still have to say he's been better than probably both Manaea and Senga. So I get why they might not be ready to make that call right now to yank Holmes for the rotation for Megill. See one more rehab start, kick the can down the road a little bit further, and then you make your decision on September 10th, I think, on which way you go. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's still Holmes and maybe Megill at some point is just added as another long man for that bullpen. Kind of similar to what we saw from him down the stretch last year. I think he did make some turns in the rotation, but there was really never any consideration that Tylor Megill was going to be starting playoff games for the Mets. And I don't know if the consideration is going to come into play at all this year either. So we'll see. And then your final game against the Phillies would be Jonah Tong again. And so that's going to be interesting. That series you could have, or you probably will have, Manaea, McClean, and Tong all going, assuming Tong can handle this transition up to the big leagues. So it's still an exciting time right now when it comes to the Mets pitching, being able to see all these young guys get their opportunities. And we're going to get a great opportunity tonight to see one of the best pitching prospects in baseball, in Jonah Tong, making that debut. Last little note, Francisco Alvarez. He does have a fractured pinky. We talked about it on yesterday's show in his rehab appearance, or his first rehab start in Syracuse after the torn ligament in his thumb. He's in the lineup, batting third, rips a double in his first at-bat, but his third at-bat, after catching 5 innings, he gets drilled in the hand again, the other hand, and this time it is a broken pinky, but it's not that severe of a break. Carlos Mendoza said it should be a relatively short time away from baseball activities. He was already throwing the baseball. The hope is he can resume normal baseball activities as soon as this weekend. But as Mendoza said, obviously a little bit of a setback compared to what the original plan was. And this is now his receiving hand. So you have to see what's going to happen. They're hoping that the inflammation subsides. It's a small fracture in that pinky, but they're going to have to see what his pain tolerance is now receiving with that hand. I don't know how much they can, immobilize the pinky to the point where it doesn't hurt. I really don't know, but he's going to be playing through a lot of pain between a thumb and a pinky injury. Both hands are going to be hurting. But I guess if you're holding a bat, right, he's got 8 fingers in the middle between those two that he can try to swing the bat with. He holds his pinky out, his thumb out. I don't even know. But we'll see what happens with Alvy. At this point, until he's playing games again, doesn't really matter much to speculate. Hopefully, he can tolerate the pain, and it's not going to make him too compromised on the field. And we'll see what it looks like on rehab assignment. But I was originally saying that Alvarez could come back as soon as this road trip. Now with this additional injury, I think it probably takes a little bit longer, and you might not see him until, at best, the tail end of the road trip, I think, when the Mets are going to face off against the Phillies. Maybe that's a series they try to get him in for. If not that, maybe you don't see him until the next homestand. But definitely another tough blow for Alvarez, who just can't seem to get out of the way when it comes to these hand issues. They just keep popping up for him. All of his injuries are just hand injuries. Last year was the wrist. This year, the handmade bone in spring training. Then the thumb. Now the pinky. Hopefully, though, he can still be a player for the Mets, because they are obviously much better when Alvarez is on the field. Anyway, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Appreciate all of you who tuned in. Tomorrow's show, I'm going to have Jack McMullen on, the radio voice of the Marlins. He's going to spend the segment with me, tell me what he sees from Jonah Tong from inside the ballpark, from a guy that comes from a really great prospect background, Jack does. So he's going to be really good to give us some insight on how Tong looked and how he can potentially remain in the big leagues beyond this start. So it should be a fun show. Make sure you tune into that. As always, thank you all for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to be a Locked On Mets Insider and be part of our texting service, find the link in the episode description, or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.